episode of the Flying Around Podcast, episode 4. Today we're going to jump into some conservation conversation. We're going to talk about the Big Hole. The Big Hole River is one of our bread and butters. We talked about the waters that we fished a little bit in the last podcast, and we kind of teased that we're going to get into some conservation stuff. And when you're talking about our waters and conservation, boy, that leads us just straight to the Big Hole River. For those of you out there that may not know as much about the Big Hole, do you want to tell us a little bit about the river and your experience with it?
Yeah, the Big Hole, I remember fishing it like the first time when I was in kindergarten. And the nature of the Big Hole, it starts in the headwaters or near Jackson, Montana, flows through this broad, beautiful open valley with no development. And towards the middle part of the river, it turns into kind of a canyon river, picks up some tributaries, gains some momentum. Pops out of the canyons and then becomes a valley river where it'll braid, flows through cottonwoods. And probably one of the most unique characteristics of the Big Hole, other than just being maybe the best freestone in Montana when it's firing on all cylinders, is that it has the last native stream-dwelling population of grayling in the lower 48, which are hanging on and doing okay. But it's, gets a lot of these. You get them when you fish the upper reaches where they're primarily located, you'll get them. But probably the most soul-touching river we fish in this area. The Beaverhead is a fish factory, and the phrase is the fish heads love it. You can see them; they're big, they're smart, it's technical, and it'll challenge any angler. The Big Hole is just everybody's idea of what a Montana river should be.
Sure,
for sure.
No, I know when I had a block of days off back when I was guiding, if I ever had a chance, and the Big Hole was fishing. I was a freestone guy. I love fishing the Yellowstone, and everything about the Yellowstone that I loved existed on the Big Hole. Usually a little bit bigger hatches, find some bigger fish, and there's just something about that water too, that tea-stained water.
Yeah, it's very unique. Yeah,
it was really fun to fish. Yeah. Since then, the big thing that happened that's got everybody talking. There's been other podcasts about it. There's been other articles written. September 12th, 2023, an article came out in the New York Times. Zombie trout.
Yeah, that read kind of like a eulogy for the Big Hole River. I can't remember a moment that I was actually been more depressed in the last 5 years than after I finished that article. And it had some photos. There was a photo of a fish, and it could have been a dead fish that's laid in the shallows and began to fungus that may not even been the cause of mortality. You have to go back a little bit before that article. And in the summer of 21, just coming out of COVID, lots of people are recreating everywhere. It was a tough year to be a trout on the Big Hole. We started getting some really low flows. We had no rain in June. I think it was about 90 every day. So the trout on the Big Hole had to endure a summer where the river was at under 300 feet per second of flow at Melrose, and combined with some higher temperatures, it was just a tough year. You're going to lose some young of the year, which is going to affect your age classes in the future, and one of the harder years from a survivability standpoint that a trout has had there.
So who do we rely on to track the fish population on the Big Hole?
It's almost like it's eerie how evenly water flows in abundant water years track with fish numbers. If you were to superimpose the graphs over the top of each other, they mirror each other almost, maybe a little lag in the fish. But more water, more fish. Less water, less fish. It's not really complicated. And that's been the driver over the last 50 years of data where we've had, fish surveys and stream flows.
It's not complicated, but how many lengthy discussions have you had to sit through where that point takes an hour to get to that more water equals more fish?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we skirt around the issues and we talk about this, that, or another, but more water, more fish.
Sure.
That's the one thing I'm sure of in this world.
No, so as anglers of the Big Hole, we're constantly tracking things all the time, like snowpack and what our forecasts look like. We talked about it being a weather-dependent river, but what happened last fall, a couple years ago, when we got a ton of moisture?
Yeah, we had in August a couple years ago where I think we had 8 consecutive days of rain, and we saw flows that were actually above normal for mid to late August, and coincidentally, those fish that were young of the year that year, the survivability was great. And so we saw a whole bunch more small fish last year. and the population itself doubled just with one normal year.
So what agency is it that keeps track of the number of fish in the Big Hole?
The Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, it electroshocks data, and they usually most of those surveys are done in the spring, and they've been doing it for 50 years to keep it, somewhat of a reliable data. It's not exact science on how many fish there are per mile, and they have about 5 or 6 different short stretches. They'll shock, and they do it consistently, and those same things, so their data is consistent over the course of those 5 decades.
So in those handful of stretches, they're estimating
Yeah.
how many fish are
And I like to take numbers at value. If I look on the internet and it tells me it's going to be 72 tomorrow, I'm going to be upset if it's 50. Well, it turns out that electroshocking fish is not an exact science. You're not taking a true census. And, let's say if you had a number that came out at 6, that means it could be anywhere between 4 and 8, which is pretty big variance.
Or if you electroshock a shallow side channel versus a bunch of deep
Yeah,
runs.
the one stretch that's really been puzzling to me on the Big Hole is the Melrose stretch. We're in kind of the middle portion of the river, bottom of the canyon water. And it's been fishing a lot better than the numbers indicate. And, so there's a divergence there between what we're seeing in anglers and what we're seeing come out with the shocking data, which they usually release in May. Well, for 5 years now, we've had really low winter flows that were equal to or lower proportionally than some of our summer flows. And so the Melrose Channel, where they start out this survey on that section, is a side channel, and there's really not very many holes in there that have good winter habitat for trout, which are going to tend to look for deeper, slower pools to ride out the winter. So I think those fish move out of there. So I don't know if we're getting a true accurate estimate of what is in that portion of the river, because we see a couple stretches above that, we've seen a significant increase in the fish population. In fact, up above Divide, it's moved right back into the range of normal. And the Melrose section seems to be lagging behind. So it's not exact science. They're doing their best. But like I said, what we see as anglers is a little bit at odds with what the numbers are telling us.
Yeah, what are the anglers seeing? What are our guides seeing over there?
We're seeing obviously a few less fish than we might have seen. You don't have to go that far back in history, only to 2014, or 2016, where we had a 50-year high in brown trout in the Big Hole. It was insane. It fished more like a tailwater than a freestone. And so obviously you're not having as many encounters as you would in 2016, but we are seeing some bigger fish, which is probably characteristic of less fish, and that we're seeing more fish that are moving north of 20 inches on a regular basis than when the Big Hole's populations are really high. It has a whole bunch of catchable size fish, like 14 to 19 inches, but the 20 inchers seem to become more elusive.
Sure. And it sounds like a lot of juvenile fish as well.
Yeah. We mentioned, we had one normal year 2 years ago, and those fish moved up to, we had a whole bunch of footlongs last year, and they're going to move up to better sized fish. And it seemed like there were a couple age classes, from 3-4 years ago where last year you didn't see a whole lot of 17 inches.
Yeah.
They were bigger, they were smaller, but that's just Mother Nature and the rhythm of populations in the wild.
Job security, that's what I like to call those guys.
Yeah.
And there's been tagging done as well, too, on the Big Hole.
Yeah, I'm thinking it was 2 years ago, the FWP, in conjunction with Montana State, instituted a study where during their electroshocking surveys, they're putting flow tags and like blue tags into the back of the fish, and they're asking anglers to participate. And if you catch that fish, clip the tag, bring it home. You can go to their website. You can talk about the fish size, where it was caught, time of day, date, things like that. They're trying to. The study is is a mortality study to find out what is or isn't a cause and effect of this.
Cycles on rivers. You and I saw it on the Madison 20 years ago. I saw it.
30.
30. Yeah, it has
We're
been
old.
that long. Yeah. Newsflash. PKD when it hit the Yellowstone back in the 20-teens. I was there, and I was on the Bighorn when it had those several years of high flows that blew out the reds and took out several classes of fish. Same things. It didn't make the New York Times or anything, but we were playing defense. We were answering the phone calls, and we asked our anglers to be patient, bear with us, and trust our instincts to take them fishing when they should go fishing. And newsflash, the Bighorn's fishing lights out. The Yellowstone, unfortunately, had a big flood effect that set it back a little bit. The Madison, is fishing
Biologically back to normal.
biologically back to normal. So where are we on the big hole today as far as?
Well, we're still in a drought that kind of began in 21, so
Right.
we're not fully back. And who knows, given, call it whatever you want, climate change, whatever, but we seem to be letting less moisture out west. So going back to our conversation, more water, more fish, I don't know until we get more water or we reach those levels whether we'll ever get back to that. But what we do know is it's still one of the best fisheries in the state,
Sure.
even in a slightly diminished capacity.
Yeah. No, we have a lot of our friends and colleagues out there that are a little bit more geographically associated to the big hole, and our hearts go out to them for sure. We've got the beaverhead down here to fish. They do too. But they're fighting the good fight. We're fighting the good fight. The phone calls, oh my goodness. Especially when that article came out. And even to this day where we're taking phone calls about the big hole. And I appreciate that, actually. I mean, feel free to give us a call, ask about fishing conditions, but I loved that opportunity to respond and give the information. Most of our anglers certainly realize that things can be sensationalized in the media, but that's a big reason why we wanted to do this podcast, too, is to talk about what's going on the big hole. And what we've sort of arrived at, other outfitters are too, is pushing our anglers towards the springtime. Why are we doing that?
Yeah, I mean, you got to play the hand you're dealt. And,
Right.
And we're looking at not a great snowpack right now, and this is true of the entire western United States. And so we have great fishing. It's just that it might not be on July 25th or August 15th. So we're encouraging more and more people to come a little earlier in the year, and the quality of fishing is still great. It's just that, as we don't know how the weather is going to play out here in the summer, but yeah, we're front loading a lot of folks.
Yeah, sure. And hey, the benefit of that, Rooster mentioned this in an advertisement, that a lot of fishing guides, when we get a block of days off, we love fishing in the springtime.
I've fished in this area. It's my favorite time of year.
Yeah.
Less people, hungry fish. We're talking about, so the big hole doesn't open until April 1st. It's been closed since October 1st.
Right.
You're talking about fish, and it was only open for about a week to 10-day window
Yeah.
in late September last year.
Those are fresh tracks.
So you're talking about fish that, they haven't seen a whole lot of people. And so we love to go fishing in the spring, and guides being guides, we like to fish streamers and stuff like that, where you don't really like to, fish with indicators ourselves and stuff, and we're willing to catch less fish. And so the opportunities for streamer fishing in the spring, and I think, are much better than the fall. When I was young, reading every bit of literature I could about the sport, everyone was like, oh, streamer fishing in the fall. You wouldn't believe it. It's the best time. Well, 35 years later, as a guide in Montana and having grown up here, I'm here to tell you that the streamer fishing is actually more predictable and a lot better in the spring than it is the fall.
Right. No, it's true. And, we also anticipate without the regulations, we're not taking a whole heck of a lot of phone calls for people wanting to fish in August on the big hole.
Yeah. The information travels so freely, and there's so much of it out there that, a lot of folks know. I think you go back 25 years ago and you might have a conversation like, what's going on? Are you getting any snow? Like, everybody has a lot of this information before they pick the phone up and even talk to you. We're not getting a lot of requests at that time.
Right. No, it's true. The big hole has been facing some issues, though. We see that the water typically follows the fish. The weather is going to set us up how it's going to set us up. But if we still have a cold, wet spring, what does that do to our fishing for the rest of the season?
There have been a lot of years where we're like, oh, all right, fist bump. We got 150% snowpack. And I remember one year in particular, Memorial Day weekend, it gets to be like 90 to 95 degrees. We had like 140% snowpack. It drops like in half in about 5 days. Big Hole shoots up to like one of the highest flows I've ever seen at 13,000 CFS. And so once that snow's gone, a true freestone like the Big Hole is entirely reliant upon rainfall to sustain flows throughout the rest of the summer. So it can go from massive peak flows, where peak flows are typically June 1, to just drop off the face of the earth to where you're looking at literally 1/100th the flow of water in August that you might have in the 1st of June.
Wow. That's significant. I think the other thing that we look for, and we've talked about this, is the way the snow falls. Snow that's been up there since Thanksgiving, boy, it's had a really good long time to kind of sit. and then bear the weight of the additional snowfall, get compacted. We all know what that old snow looks like that's, in a normal year still left at the bottom of our snow on our driveway or sidewalks or whatever. It almost kind of turns into a glacier.
Yeah.
Whereas a spring snow, if it falls, we're certainly optimistic about it, but we pretty much consider it rainfall because that, wet, heavy powder is going to come off pretty dang quickly. So,
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems, there's an old saying in Montana, like you're always about 10 days away from a drought. No matter how good it looks on one day, 10 days later, you jump the temperatures up and the wind blows and you could be headed towards one. And so it's important for not only our segment of the economy, but statewide.
Right.
It doesn't really matter what you do, even if you're not directly related to agricultural, fishing, or something else. It's those by nature are going to affect the economy of whatever it is you happen to do.
Right. So then we get restricted. We'll probably see hoot owl restrictions first, which once again, that's a self-correcting problem. When it's hot and low water after 2 p.m., you're probably not going to want to be out there.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens is they'll eventually shut the river down. They'll close it completely to angling. And we just kind of want to throw that out there that we support these decisions, that we're not begging for an open river during periods of warm temperatures and low waters. I think the thing that does frustrate us a little bit, you and I have had a number of long discussions about this, is the closure during the spawning period. As an angler, I realize that they're certainly trying to protect the reds, trying to protect the fish. Used to guide Depew Spring Creek. I think something in the neighborhood of 15 miles north and 15 miles east of Livingston. About 90% of the trout are born there. So it's, in some places, one big giant red. So what Daryl does is go out there with cones, puts one on the upper end of the big red, puts one on the lower end of the other. Why don't we see those kind of restrictions on the big hole?
I think that when, and this was prompted by not only the New York Times article, Fly Fisherman Magazine ran a feature article, like I can't remember the exact date, but it followed along the similar storyline to the New York Times. Many other smaller publications jumped in, and it was kind of the same information. And so the FWP, they don't have a lot of tools other than to manage fishermen. Right. They don't control how much water's in the river. They don't control how much rain we get, how much snow. So when they see a situation where the population drops, the only tool they have is harsher fishing regulations. And so they came down pretty strict on it, with an October 1 closure that's in place to this day. And honestly, what I saw play out over the last 20 years on the big hole, we all know where those significant size reds are. Mm-hmm. And I'd like to encourage it doesn't matter if you're what river, body of water you're fishing on, you're not cool if you're catching fish off a red.
No, you suck.
It's kind of a pastime of mine in November and December when I see stuff on social media with people with the big brown trout. I'm like, and it almost instantaneously I comment like, nothing like seeing those videos during spawning season. Yeah. And so there's more of us doing this all the time, and our river, they're fragile. Trout streams are fragile. If yours might be doing well right now, but something around the corner could invite a situation like we're talking about with these famous rivers in Montana where they all had a little hiccup and had a little moment where things weren't so great. So I think personally, and this goes back to like the previous biologist, this is 20 years ago, where we know where some of these significant red areas are. And we could even close, an 8 to 10 mile section of the river and still allow some of the others where there's not prolific spawning activity to go to open. And I hope that the Fish, Life, and Parks, now that they're even self-admittedly are starting to realize that anglers aren't actually the problem. We kind of got the finger pointed at us pretty hard after this, like, oh, geez, look what you guys did to the big hole. It's like, well, not really. And even our biologist on the big hole has admitted on another podcast and in public several times now that he's starting to think that angling pressure might not be the problem.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Funny how that works. What was it? It was all the sunscreen and bug spray on our hands.
Oh, it was absurd. It was chaos there for a while where somebody at Montana State University was thinking that possibly sunblock and bug spray could be causing some type of disease. And it's like, really?
Sure.
That's where we're at. So we've kind of weathered that storm. We've seen an improvement in the fish population on the big hole. We'll do like we do every day. We'll look at the weather forecast and hope for moisture in one kind or another. I'd like to add also that, this was pretty high tension about this time. So shortly after, this article appears, it's in the local media, it's in a number of, really, not highly published publications are running pieces on this. We have a new conservation group pop up, and I'm all on board. It's like the name is Save Wild Trout, and like, who's not for saving wild trout? I even donated a pretty good chunk of money, and they allowed them to use our logo on their website. And time went by, it seemed that they were feeding some of this sensationalist stuff. I'm not going to claim they did. But the reality is after a 90-minute conversation with the head of the organization, it came down to their intent was to do one thing, and that was to litigate a water quality issue on the Big Hole, which is not the problem. You will see elevated levels of phosphorus and other nutrients in the river late in summer when it's low and even and well below normal flows. But as a good friend of mine who's a geologist likes to point out, dilution is the solution.
Sure.
If you have twice as much water, you have half as much of what it is you're worried about. So
Right.
we don't think that they've stolen a lot of thunder from the conservation side on this issue, and that's not the long-term problem. Anybody who knows anything about the Big Hole knows this is a water issue.
Sure. So the FWP, for better or for worse, they do a lot of good out there. But like you said, they don't have necessarily all the tools in the tool belt. In your opinion, what tools do we need to help things on the Big Hole?
We're going to kind of probably launch into that in episode 5 of Flying Around. And I've spent about 22 and a half hours a day over the last 30 years thinking about how can we sustain water in the Big Hole. We can build new golf courses. We can't build a new Big Hole. It's truly a gem of the natural world, and both as a fishery in the valley itself, the lifestyle, and everything else. It's just an absolute crown jewel in trout streams in North America. So we have some ideas, and nobody really wants to talk about it.
Right.
It offends a few people, but hey, we're all here together, and this is 2026, and we need to see the Big Hole be a sustainable fishery. We have a lot of local anglers that, due to these perennial closures we've been seeing in late summer, we're ahead of the game because we live this every day and we're on the water, and it's always in the front of our mind. But the more casual guys that might go fishing every 2 weeks, they're kind of about year 4 or 5 are starting to kind of voice out. We see them here, they're seeing them in fly shops in Butte. People are like, this isn't cool. I don't like the fact that the Big Hole's closing at some point in late July or August, and then I don't even get to fish it again the rest of the year. So there's going to need to be a solution worked out. And like most solutions where you have a lot of interested parties, there's going to be some people that are happy and some that aren't. But if we want to preserve the Big Hole and continue to keep it as an elite level fishery,
Sure.
We're going to have to find some solutions that are outside of what we can do as anglers, what the
Right.
FWP can do, and it's going to have to involve a lot more parties.
We're facing these same restrictions on the beaverhead. We're facing these same restrictions on the ruby. Where the hell can you go fishing in Dillon, Montana if it's nice out on February, whatever the heck day it is?
We've got, one of our young tropic boys grew up here in Dillon, fishes Poindexter Slough a lot, as well as a lot of local Dillon residents, a couple miles south of town. And it's kind of a side channel of the Big Hole, the beaverhead with a little bit of spring water. And last spring, it came out with this shocking number of fish per mile. And a lot of them are small, but it's an amazing winter and springtime fishery.
Sure.
And so a lot of folks are going there. Got one stretch of the upper beaverhead open from Pipe Organ Bridge downstream to the Barrett's Diversion. So anglers are either going to Poindexter or they're fishing below Pipe Organ Bridge, we call it. We're a month out here, I guess, on having everything kind of opened up. But I get it. And none of us are crying that hard about these closures. We want to see our fisheries healthy, not just for our financial interests, but because we love fishing, we love rivers, and we're advocates of rivers and fisheries. And
Right.
We're willing to take a little knock here and there if it maintains the long-term stability of these great fisheries we all love.
Yeah, no, sure. I think we'd agree with that. So that's kind of a teaser for the next up and coming podcast. If we thought we could fit all the issues into a 25-minute podcast or whatever, we're going to end up here. We've got a lot more we want to talk about. I'll just expand on this real quick before we wrap up here. So the closures exist on the Beaverhead and the Big Hole too. This is a Jefferson River Basin study. The 3 tributaries.
And they also, I believe, they're taking fish on the Madison as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think they have 2 more years they're going to be running this study. I have mixed feelings about it, but they're trying to do something. I questioning with what I know with a lifetime of whether it's going to really do anything to move the needle on the fish population, but at least they're trying.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, so what can anglers do to move the needle?
Avoid, any situation where the water's too warm, too low. Montana has some of the more restrictive stuff with these hoot owl laws. They don't occur in the surrounding states around us, but typically I consider it like, those of us that are experienced anglers, we know, you don't step out there when the water's like 69, 70 degrees
Sure.
at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Right.
It's not going to be good fishing.
Right.
That's just one thing you learn early on, is if you placed yourself in that situation, you can't expect to have good fishing, but be a little more gentle with every fish you catch. I've noticed myself even, it was kind of a big shock to the system, this isn't invincible.
Right.
And these aren't always going to be here unless we do something to take care of them and preserve these fisheries. So I've noticed that since this whole situation happened, there's a little more TLC coming out of me even with every fish I encounter.
Yeah, for sure. Last couple of years during these drought conditions, here's the beauty of it. Necessity is the mother of invention. What I'm seeing is a lot of anglers heading out and finding other places to fish. And boy, I sure would like to sell a heck of a lot more 7.5 foot four weights out of this shop.
Yeah, we all know about these, these famous trout streams that some of them have been, famous for 75 years, and everyone in the world who ever strung up a rod has heard of the Madison River, but if you just are willing to pull out we have such great new map programs like Onyx and stuff out there, take a day and say, wow, I really want to go try this little stream one day. And you're going to might find some surprises out there with bigger fish than you think in an abundance and in just an amazing setting. And so a lot of folks, they're headed up to the mountains and leaving the valleys where water is warm, and they're headed out to smaller streams where it's cooler. And so there's plenty of fishing. I like to tell our new employees here that if you went to a new place every single day of the summer, it would take you several years to really touch everything that you can get to within an hour or two of here.
Right. No, and I think as anglers, we kind of set our own expectations and our own goals. If you're going out to a small stream that you just found on a satellite photo, I bet your success that you need to feel good about yourself that day is not going to be so much centered around the number of fish you caught.
Yeah, things that are getting harder and harder to find in this world, like solitude. Mm-hmm. That to me is just worth a lot there. A good friend of mine who I've guided all over the Western Hemisphere and shared some experiences in other places with him. He kind of got into the small stream fishing last year. And in our conversations all winter, he's like, boy, I can't wait to get back out and do that. I can't wait to get out and do that. Mm-hmm. And so he's had some epic days on all the fisheries around here. I fished with him in Tierra del Fuego. We've done some saltwater fishing. The guy's seen some amazing fishing. He's caught some Atlantic salmon and stuff. And the number one thing he talks about to me now is like, I can't wait to get my 2 new little rods out and head off.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
We had one of the longtime legendary fishing guides pop into this who's just gone absolutely bonkers for carp.
Yeah. One of my mentors when I was young, we had about an hour and a half conversation about carp fishing at Clark Canyon, and he's gotten waded into it so far that I'd learned more about carp fishing in about a half hour there locally than I probably knew.
Yeah.
And so, that's what he's doing. Like, trout fishing's getting kind of tough. I'm going to get up in the morning and I'm going to go stalk these super sneaky big fish, picky fish around, out on the shallows on the reservoir.
No, I used to fish carp quite a bit up on the Bighorn Reservoir too, and it doesn't get good until the afternoon gets a little hot.
Yeah.
It starts bringing the fish.
Yeah, they're a different creature than a trout for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one quick little fly shop plug. In August, if you're in and around Dillon, we'll help you find those places. We'll put you on the right small stream. It's not rocket science. You're not going to be fishing that drop shot rig we talked about.
We're not going to talk about these places on this podcast. You're not going to find them on our website. Walk up to the counter. If you walk up to the counter and you're like kind of lost for a place to go fishing, we have no problem whatsoever pulling up Google Earth and saying, have you ever thought about going to this place?
Right.
Yeah. And some of our most positive feedback we've had from customers were when we kind of took them by the hand and led them off in a direction that might not have found.
And this is, sorry, I'll get on my soapbox here. This is my fly shop pet peeve. If you want good information from not just us, from any fly shop, buy some flies before you pull out the map and ask where to go.
Yeah. If you roll right up to the counter with a bunch of maps and stuff and you got a line of 5 people behind you and you're expecting to have their undivided attention for. There are times either when we're not busy where we'll take an hour to line you out, but there's other times where you're going to have to like kind of step to the side and okay, let me help these folks for a second, and I'll try to help you out. But certainly, it's a motivation, and I realized that at a young age. I don't think before I owned a fly shop that I ever went into a fly shop and didn't buy something.
Right. No, it's a common courtesy.
It's like, how often do you see people walking out of the grocery store and they didn't buy anything?
But give me some great information about how to cook the steak I'm not going to buy.
Yeah. That's good, yeah.
We've got some other hot button issues we're not going to jump into yet, but that'll be our teaser for our next podcast. Anything else you want to talk about today, Shaun?
No, I think we covered some ground. I mean, we addressed the issue on the big hole, and I can't wait for April 1st to get here.
Yeah.
I miss it. I haven't been there since about July 8th.
I know. I'm looking to get out on the big hole myself as well. We hope you guys find some time to come do it too, or if not, we'll send you up into the mountains. All right. Well, that'll do it for Flying Around Podcast, episode 4. Thanks, guys.
That's good.